Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Eric Schein. I'm a graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point in New York. Kings Point is a sister academy to West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy, all four as federal and military service academies. I come out of Kings Point as a naval officer serving on special duty in the United States Merchant Marine. The Coast Guard Academy is also a federal service academy, but it is not a military academy, or it has not been a military academy. The means for getting into the academy are much different than the other four academies. Today's topic, however, is entitled Germania, and this refers to the area known previously as Greater Germania, which includes Switzerland, Liechtenstein, the former German federations and German republics now known as Germany, even the Netherlands and more, Sweden. This area we can see not only from World War I and World War II, but the Franco-Prussian Wars, Napoleonic Wars, and more have controlled, if you go back for the last 1,000 years, world history has centered around the issue of German unification or German reunification. And when you start to look at what's going on here in the United States and see the pervasive nature of a certain group of, some people would refer to them as fascists or corporatists operating here in the United States, or German industrialists, these individuals are not, it is not an ideology unto itself. It is a group of individuals who work as knights, for want of a better word, for the royal families, specifically the Habsburgs. And I want to go into and throw out a lot of different issues or facts of concern. First and foremost, Queen Elizabeth is related to the Habsburgs. She has taken over a great deal of control of the throne. England is the United Kingdom. It is the seat of a series or system of kingdoms. England is also an extension of Germany. The European Union is now a recreation of the United Kingdoms, or kingdom, and they are trying to recreate or create a colony or kingdom here in the United States. Canada is still a member of the, it is a constitutional monarchy that is still a member of the Commonwealth. It did not receive its independence until 1973, I believe. The fact that it is still, has sworn allegiance to the royal crown families of England and the Queen should be an alarm for the United States as a free republic. The individuals are trying to convert the United States into a kingdom, and by merging or creating the North American Union, it would take the United States, a free republic, and merge it with a constitutional monarchy. And Mexico as well, when you look at it, 1/3 of the wealth in Mexico is controlled by one family. If that's not a monarchy, I don't know what is. But Arnold Schwarzenegger is Austrian, and Austria and Bavaria are two of the other countries that are or were part of Greater Germania and that are still part of this federation of quote-unquote kingdoms. You have to look deeper behind. People have referred to the shadow government or Big Brother. The shadow government or Big Brother is the royal families who are in the background pulling the strings on everything going on around the world and here in the United States, and have us over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an Austrian citizen who has not renounced his Austrian citizenship. He is now the governor of the state of California, and a lot of people want to put him up as president of the United States, although he was not born here in the United States. Bernanke is Austrian. He's the current Fed chair. Henry Kissinger is Bavarian, was raised and educated in London to a degree or to an age, and then migrated here to the United States to act as an agent for the royal families. Australia is still a member of the Commonwealth, of what is known as the United Kingdom, and has a sworn allegiance for all of its subjects, not citizens, to the Queen. Rupert Murdoch was a former subject of Australia who built his media empire in Australia as backed by the Queen and royal families, and is now a citizen of the United States who has used his backing by the Crown to leverage his way into the United States and to establish his media empire here to help take down the United States from within for the royal families. Halliburton is moving, or has now finally consummated, the deal in the move to Dubai. That is a kingdom. 15 of the 19 terrorists from Saudi Arabia in the 9/11 attacks involving the World Trade Center, or 15 of the 19 terrorists were from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a kingdom. We did not attack that country. We attacked Iraq, which is a republic. The old world royal families of Europe are using the United States, and specifically those from England, using England as a thoroughfare or subway stop for the older ancient families from Austria, Bavaria, Germany, Liechtenstein, and specifically the Habsburg family. Now the New World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, the elevators in there are to be manufactured by a company called ThyssenKrupp. Thyssen and Krupp are two large German royal industrialists from Germany who are now married into the Habsburg family, and they will be building, in the aftermath of 9/11, the elevators for the new Freedom Tower. And it doesn't stop there. T-Mobile, a telecommunications company here in the United States, T stands for telecom with a K, T-E-L-E-K-O-M. T-Mobile is a German corporation. We saw what Lee Iacocca did with Chrysler in using U.S. taxpayer dollars to save Chrysler and then eventually sell it off to Daimler-Benz, that has sold it, which is German, of course, and Bavarian and Austrian, which has sold it off to Cerberus. And Cerberus is one of these sovereign wealth funds or holding groups or equity firms like the Carlyle Group that have a majority stake in them by the royal families, and not just from Europe, but from the Middle East as well, and not just many of the Arab and Muslim countries, but Israel as well. And Israel is, even though it may declare itself to be a democracy, it is a kingdom. And we've had, the kingdom, or the kings of Jerusalem, not only Solomon and David, but even up into the early or late 1800s, there were still royal families in Jerusalem that were related back into, several hundred, if not several thousand years back in history. Admiral Allen is the current Coast Guard Commandant. Allen is also a very old English and German name, and you have to tie England and Germany together. They used World War I and World War II to sucker us into, as a free republic, into the affairs of Europe. The Habsburgs not only gave us the European Economic Community, but gave us the European Union. But Admiral Allen, and this is one of those names that you have to look for, like Anderson and Kaiser and others, Admiral Allen is the current U.S. Coast Guard Commandant who is now using military tribunals against American civilians here in the United States. He is married to Pamela Hess of Hess Oil, and there was a scandal in the Interior Department involving Hess Oil. But not only is she an heiress to this oil dynasty from back east, she is also related to Rudolf Hess, former deputy Führer to Adolf Hitler. And much of this is tied back to Martin Bormann as a former executive director to Adolf Hitler, where he outsourced the capital and family lines and corporations and patents and copyrights and plans and intellectual property of over 750 German industrialist families or knights for the royal families out into the world to act as fingerlings to grow the empire from behind the scenes in a somewhat benign fashion. Families like Weyerhaeuser, I've mentioned Kaiser, and Kaiser, the name means king in German. Henry J. Kaiser not only built Liberty ships here in the United States, an enormous shipbuilder, steel manufacturer tied to the lumber industry, Weyerhaeuser and others, and Robert Dollar and Stanley Dollar, and what eventually became American President Lines, as tied to the Bush family. John McCain is married to Cindy McCain, who is tied to and is one of the largest beer distributors, or is the heiress to one of the largest Anheuser-Busch, and it's the same name and the same genus, although it is spelled differently. These German industrialists are not acting as citizens in a free republic. They are German and European industrialists who are coming in and using our free society, our free system, our republic, to establish themselves and establish a beachhead here in the United States for these old world royal families. I ask you to start looking at these matters and start looking into, not only was World War I started by the assassination of Duke Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, who were members of and heirs to the Habsburg dynasty. World War II was a continuation thereof, as was the Cold War and what we are now involved in. And even Putin from Russia is also tied to these royal families. George Bush is not only related to Queen Elizabeth, he is also related to the Habsburgs, as is Queen Elizabeth. And I brought this up before on other shows. This is Volume 1. Today is October 30th, 2008. There will be a Volume 2 to this show. It will be on military tribunals. But Ronald Reagan, and many of these names are from antiquity, Reagan, Doyle, and others, Gibson, Dunn, Crutcher, these are names that are tied to Ted Olson, who was named by President Bush as Solicitor General for representing Bush against Gore in the Supreme Court relating to the election in 2000. But Ronald Reagan was knighted by the Queen of England, as was George Herbert Walker Bush, knighted by the Queen of England. It is a hereditary title that is passed on to his son. These are agents for the crown, agents for the Queen. This is not conspiracy. This is history repeating itself. Our founding fathers knew and understood very well that you do not accept titles of nobility as an American, as a freeman, as a free citizen of a free republic in a free society. Not only was Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush also knighted by the Queen, but so was Henry Kissinger, who was born in Bavaria, raised in London, and came to the United States as an agent for the crown families and the Queen. Henry Kissinger was also knighted, as was Alan Greenspan, former Fed chair, also knighted by the Queen. Colin Powell, who sat on the documents for the My Lai massacre, also knighted by the Queen. And he went into the United Nations and lied about weapons of mass destruction and anthrax and more. And there's video on this in the actual introduction to our show. showing Colin Powell at the United Nations. Not only was Colin Powell knighted by the Queen, so was General Schwarzkopf. Rudy Giuliani, Mr. 9/11, was also knighted by the Queen. And interestingly enough, in my own situation, I am and have been before a military tribunal for the last 5 years in the Coast Guard. I'm not in the Coast Guard. I am a naval officer as a graduate of Kings Point, serving on special duty in the United States Merchant Marine. The Coast Guard has no authority over officers such as myself, personnel within the United States Merchant Marine, but it is declaring and alleging that I'm a civilian and has been prosecuting me in a military tribunal for the last 5 years. And names like Nicole Lichtenstein have popped up. Alan Hochstetler as a witness against me, a good German. Nicole Lichtenstein, is a family member of the Liechtenstein monarchy from Europe, which is a constitutional monarchy. She was an attorney who sat in on these matters. Even now there's a Gambino, which is a member of the Italian royal, and many people call them crime families, who's sitting in on the GAO. There's also individuals with the last name of King who are within the GAO and involved in investigating the military tribunals that the Coast Guard is carrying on right now. Admiral Allen is also involved in, and the individual who helped field military forces in response to Katrina and Rita in the South. He is also responsible for naming the very first 2 national security cutters for the Coast Guard, named the Bertholf and the Vosch. And Admiral Bertholf was the first U.S. Coast Guard commandant. The Coast Guard was formed in 1915 in the middle of World War I, and Admiral Bertholf was knighted by the King of England and the royal families. And when you start to gather all of this incidental and coincidental information, this is not just a coincidence. What is going on is the old world royal families from Europe have been working overtime since our Declaration of Independence, since our drafting of and signing of the U.S. Constitution and creation of our amendments. They have worked overtime to restore the United States not just as a member of the Commonwealth and system of United Kingdoms, but if we will not agree to that willingly, that they will turn us into and are turning us into on the same status, same level as a colony. And when it feels like King George III, it usually is. And what is going on right now, even if you look at Barack Obama, his mom, Ann Dunham, a white woman, is related to the royal families from Europe. And I hope that maybe Barack Obama is a much more honest and decent and intellectual individual who can restore the free republic and is not beholding to the royal families of Europe. But when you start to look at the personnel on his campaign, people like David Axelrod and others, they are tied to, there's been a Jonathan Axelrod involved in my own situation. These names like Anderson and Boggs and others, Kaczynski, Brzezinski, are popping up because they are either tied to, as fingerlings or heir apparents to, the royal bloodlines, or are acting as agents or representatives, or, for want of a better word, in an old world word, knights for the royal families. And they are intent on taking down America as a free republic and making sure that it is not established as a free society. Because when we have a free republic, it takes every citizen, every individual here in the United States, and turns us into a sovereign, makes us a king and or queen in that free republic, and equal to the kings and queens of these kingdoms throughout the world. And they cannot stand this. They hate it because they cannot see us as the beasts of the field, the rabble, as equals to themselves and their own bloodline. When you start to look into the other countries and what the kingdoms are still in the world, there are 54 member nations of the Commonwealth of United Kingdoms that England is the head of. And what is going on now is the Coast Guard is acting as a spearhead for the royal families here in the United States, and has done more to damage American flag, American crude, and American-built shipping, commercial shipping here in the United States than any royal and or foreign navy could do. Right now, 97% of the cargo coming into and leaving the United States is being carried on foreign flag vessels. And these vessels are just like a floating embassy, whether it's a U.S. flag embassy or a foreign embassy like Chinese or any other country, a flag of convenience. It goes by the laws, rules, and regulations of the flag that it flies. When it does not fly the American flag, it is used as a beachhead to attack and take down the United States, rather than to extend our Constitution and our system of law and self-governance around the world to where our ships under our flag with our crews and our federal maritime officers are plying the 7 seas. Instead, we have 97% of the cargo carried to the United States and taken from the United States on foreign flag vessels. And many of these vessels are owned and controlled by people who still are living here within the United States and are doing much like what has happened with Halliburton. CSX is one of them, and they are also tied to Cerberus, as was Chrysler. I think Chrysler has been sold off to another corporation now. When you start looking into all of these old world German industrialist families, if you study how Rupert Murdoch has become an agent for the Queen here in the United States, you will understand very clearly how this game is played. Cindy McCain is a trust fund, a floating trust fund that has been attached to John McCain for a bunch of German industrialists and corporatists and fascists here in the United States. Antonin Scalia, his father, was president of the American Fascist Society here in the United States, and he is now Supreme Court Justice. You can look to Roberts and Alito and others, and they are trying to and passing not only case precedents, important case precedents, that is targeted at taking down the United States and establishing it as a kingdom, to where even if you look at Article 51 that has been recently passed as an executive order or a presidential directive, the president under Article 51 would have control and absolute authority not only over Congress, but also Congress and the entire United States as far as corporations, industry, business, civilians, citizens, and more. And this goes to not only the creation of the North American Union as a northern state or super state to oppose and be set off against South America and enveloping in Central America as well. But when you look at what's going on, not only in the home mortgage crisis, the involvement of Deutsche Bank, J.P. Morgan with Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns. J.P. Morgan came to the United States in the 1800s, helped incite the Civil War, funded both sides of the Civil War, profited from both sides of the Civil War. He also helped establish and fund General Electric that owns and controls NBC. And you see that our quote-unquote corporate or mainstream media is, effectively owned and controlled by the royal crown families of England and Europe and the Queen. And that does not bode well for our nation as a free republic, and it needs to change. One of the other things that is tied into all this, going into the mortgage crisis, is that the Coast Guard is now within the Department of Homeland Security, operating under military law, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Title 10, that was written specifically for the Department of Defense. The Coast Guard under Admiral Allen, as tied to these royalists and loyalists to the Crown, have taken military law out of the Department of Defense and moved it into Homeland Security. And they are now carrying on military tribunals, military commissions under Article 2, the executive branch, using the Military Commissions Act, Warner Defense Authorization Bill, even the Administrative Procedure Act as administered under the Uniform Code of Military Justice to administer military law or civilian law to civilians under the UCMJ or military law. This is unconscionable. They are turning the Department of Homeland Security into a Department of Defense that is operating under military law and turning the Department of Defense, our former Department of Defense, into a Department of War or Department of Aggression. And if we do not stand up and realize what is going on, and this is about kingdoms and or free republics, and that to maintain and restore the free republic and really truly have a free society here in the United States that works for all people, we need to work to abolish and remove the activities and behavior and involvement of these royal families here in the United States that is centered around what used to be called Greater Germania. My name is Lieutenant Eric Schein. This program is called In the Zone. This is October 30th, 2008. The show is called Germania. Thank you and have a nice day.
Graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.